Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar devoted to Cubo REST API. My name is Gleb Gorelov and I represent the development team of Cubo platform. During this webinar, we will have a deeper look into the REST API and see how it works. We are going to create a client-side application using the REST API for a public website. This session covers authentication, CRUD operations on entities, execution of predefined GPQL queries, execution of server methods, uploading and downloading files. Imagine that we have a Cubo app for a small burger shop called Big Cubina Burger. Let's have a look at the data model of our application. The main entities of the model are order, order item, and menu item. The order entity has status represented by the order status enumeration, reference to a user who made the order, and a list of order items. The order item entity contains quantity of ordered menu items. The menu item entity has image, name, date, and price fields. Let's switch to application. It's a simple application which has screens only for menu items and orders. So we can see menu items with images, name, weight, price, and orders. As you can see, the application stores information about burgers and orders and serves the purpose to be just a backend application. So we're going to create a client-side application using the REST API for the public website. The Universal REST API provides the following functionality: CRUD operations on entities, execution of predefined GPQL queries, execution of service methods, getting metadata such as entities, views, enumerations, data types, getting current user permissions, for example, access to entities, attributes, specific permissions, getting current user information like name, language, time zone, and uploading and downloading files. REST API uses the OAuth2 protocol for authentication and supports anonymous access. The detailed documentation for the REST API is written according to Swagger specification and is available at files.cuboplatform.com/swagger. As a front-end technology, I will use Angular, actually Angular 4. Angular is a framework for building client applications in HTML and either JavaScript or language like TypeScript that compiles to JavaScript. The framework consists of several libraries, some of them core and some optional. Developing Angular applications combines HTML templates with angularized markup, written component classes to manage those templates, adding application logic in services, and boxing components and services in modules. Then you launch the application by bootstrapping the root module. Angular takes over presenting your application content in a browser and responding to user interactions according to the instructions you've provided. So let's move to the application development and let's open our Angular application. So I've already prepared an applications tab that has the navigation bar at the top, login screen, and the home screen in which we will show a list of menu items. So let's open Angular project in the IDE and expand the services directory. If we look at the application code, we'll see that we have stubs for several services. For example, authentication service. Authentication service will be used for login and logout purpose. User service will store and load current user information and notify other components if the user was changed. Storage service. It's just a helper service which will be used to generalize the work with storage, in our case with local storage. And in addition to these services, we have alert service and alert component here. which serve the purpose of showing messages on the current page, such as error or success. Before we proceed to the menu items browser, we need to create a model class for the menu item entity. So let's create a new directory with name model and create a new class. With name menu item. Okay. And replace its content with the following. So our menu item class has ID, name, weight, price, and image. And as the image field is represented as the file descriptor entity in the Cube application, we will do the same and create the file descriptor class. So let's create one more class with name file descriptor. And replace its content with the following. So our file descriptor class has ID, name, extension, size, and create date fields. And we need to go back to the menu item and import file descriptor class. Okay. Now let's open menu items browse component here. Okay. Let's add menu items field, which will store menu items to display, like this. Import menu item, and let's add the stub method for generating images URL. So, like this. Now go to the HTML template of this component. And let's place the following. For the first iteration, we will show just a simple table, and we use special Angular attributes directives such ng4 to iterate through our menu items and present them as tables columns, table cells. Okay, and let's add styles. Okay, and go to the application. As a result, we have an empty table. So let's create a service to obtain menu items from the Cube application using REST API. Go to the IDE, and within the services directory, let's create a new service with name menu items. Okay, I don't need tests. And let's add the following. Okay, so we have added constants for entity name and entity view, which values will be used for request to the REST API. Also, we injected alert service and added method for error handling, and added method stubs for loading menu items and obtaining image URL. Now we need to implement the load menu items method, and we can either write requests and parse responses manually or use CubeRest.js library. CubeRest.js is a JavaScript library for web and Node.js, which facilitates Cube platform's REST API usage. It provides all methods required for working with Cube REST API. For example, login, logout are used to get an authentication token and or revoke it. getUserInfo gets the current user information. Load entities and load entity are used to load list of entities or a single entity. Commit entity, delete entity are used to create, update, or delete an entity. Invoke service is used to execute a method of the service, and many others, along with several model classes such userinfo, user permission, and so on. You can find KubeRest.js at GitHub, as well as read more detailed information. Let me open it. So on GitHub, Kube platform KubeRest.js. So here you can find information about installation, sample usage, and so on. So please read this manual. Okay, and in our application, we will use this KubeRest.js. So let's add it as a dependency to our project. Go to the IDE, open the terminal window. Let's stop the application and install Kube platform KubeRest.js. Okay, now if we open package.json, we can see that KubeRest.js is added as a dependency of our project. Before we proceed with menu items loading, I'm going to add a Kube integration service to facilitate using of KubeRest.js within services directory. Let's create a new service with name Kube integration. Okay. And let's add the following. This service creates an instance of Kube app and returns a URL to obtain a file represented as the file descriptor entity. So here get files absolute URL. Here you can see that we initialize new Kube app and take notice of this storage attribute. Along with defining application name and API URL, we define the storage attribute by obtaining its value from the storage service. Now we need to provide the newly created menu items and Kube integration services for all components. So let's open app module TS and within the provider's attribute, let's add Kube integration service and menu item service. Okay, and let's go back to the menu items service. First of all, let's add Kube app field. Inject Kube integration service here. And obtain Kube app instance within constructor, like this. And add methods implementation. So for load menu items. Okay, and for get image URL. So in the load menu items method, we use the load entities method defined in KubeRest.js. As parameters, we pass entity name and entity view. Okay, let's open Swagger and go to the files section. According to Swagger documentation, a file represented by the file descriptor entity can be obtained at the file's ID path. Our getURL method returns either the URL to obtain file from the Cubo app or just placeholder URL. And if we open getFiles absolute URL, as we saw before, the files absolute URL method builds a link to the files controller using the base API URL plus file path that equals to files, and then we just add file ID. Okay, let's open menu items browse component and replace its content with the following. I've added load menu items method, which invoke load menu items from menu items service, and if we succeed, then gets value. And I injected menu items service to be able to use it. And for get image URL, we also call get image URL method from menu items service. Let's start application. And restart. And instead of list of menu items, we see the error unauthorized. So before accessing a protected resource, a user must get an authentication token. But I want to show list of menu items for unauthorized users and provide additional options for authorized ones. And of course, we have such opportunity. If the request to protected resource doesn't contain the authentication header, then the user will be authenticated with the anonymous session. By default, anonymous access is forbidden, and to enable it, we need to set the KubeRest anonymous enabled application property to true. So let's go to the studio and click the ID button and open our Cube application in the ID and open web app properties, web modules, let's say web app properties, okay, and add Cube REST anonymous enabled equal to true. Then go back to the studio and restart our application. Okay, let's restart the page. And now we see the list of menu items. Let's proceed with login functionality. As I said before, authorized users will have additional options such as edit and create menu items, place orders, overview personal orders, and cancel orders. So we need to implement login and logout functionality. Let's go back to the IDE with our Angular application. We already have stubs for authentication and user services, so let's just implement them. Let's open authentication service and replace its content with the following. We did the same as in menu items service. We injected Cuba integration service, get current Cuba app, and invoke its methods that meet our needs. So we invoke the login method with username and password to obtain the authentication token, but we don't store it by ourselves because Cuba app do it for us. And we call the logout method to revoke the authentication token. And if we successfully log in, we call the user service load user info method to load current user information and notify all transcribed components that user info has changed. And the same if we successfully log out. Now go to the user service and replace its content with the following. In the implementation of load user info method, we use get user info method from Cuba app. If we successfully get user information, we store this value into local field. We will store this value in file storage using storage service. and we notify all subscribers that user information has changed. So now let's implement method for getting and storing current user information in the local storage. And let's open storage service and place the following. Okay, now let's open root app component. Let's add user info field. We will update this value every time current user is changed. So let's add implementation within our ng on init method. So if user info is changed, we just obtain new user information and store it in our local field. Now let's restart our application. And let's try to log in. So we see additional elements have appeared on the navbar. This is because we use special Angular directive called ngIf within HTML template to check if user info is not null. In other words, we show additional functionality only for authorized users. Now let's implement functionality to create, edit, and delete menu items and to upload files. First of all, let's add methods to the menu item service for committing and removing menu items and for uploading files. So let's go back to the IDE, open menu items service, and I'm going to replace its content with the following. So I've added load menu item to load a single menu item by its ID. So I use load entity method from Cube app, and I pass entity name and its ID and its and entity view to load a single entity. Commit menu item method invoke commit entity method with entity name and particular item to commit. Delete menu item uses delete entity method with entity name and entity ID. And to upload file, fetch the general method in which we can define what we want to use, post request or get request, particular path in which we send a request. So in our case, it is files path and with additional parameter file name. So if we go to the Swagger, we'll see the files path is used to upload files. We need to use post method. So you can read more detailed documentation here. Now let's go back to ID and update the HTML template of menu item browser. We will show additional fields, button to create a new menu item, and buttons to remove and edit menu items. Let's add additional styles. And implement methods in the components class. Create method will navigate us to the special road path, and edit method will do the same but passing additional parameter item ID. We will implement menu item editor a little bit later. Remove method just invoke delete menu item method from menu item service, and then remove deleted item from menu items list. Let's open our application and see changes. So now we see a create button and edit or remove button. So for now, clicking on create and edit does nothing because there is no component for defined road. but we can delete any item. Let's create a component to edit menu items. Let's go back to the ID and create a new Angular component and set name menu item edit. So let's open its HTML template and replace its content with the following. It's just a form with fields for all menu item attributes and 2 buttons to commit changes and to decline changes. Okay, we need to add styles. Let's open its component class and replace its content with the following. When this component is opened, it checks if we has ID parameter in our URL, and if so, we call load menu item method from menu item service to load existing menu item, or we just create a new menu item. If we click back, we just go back to the previous page, and if we click commit, we check if there is a new image file. So if user uploaded a new image file, then we need to upload this file to the server. That is to say, to create file descriptor for this file. And after this method successfully completed, we can parse created file descriptor entity, set it to the menu item, and then commit menu item. Or if there is no new image file, we just commit menu item by invoking commit menu item method from menu item service. And then we return to the previous page. And now we need to add a routing rules for a newly created component. So let's open app routing module and add the following. We have added 2 routes for edit and edit with additional ID param, and both these routes will open menu item edit component. Now let's check how menu item editor works. So let's refresh the page and for instance click edit. So we see this editor. We can change price, for example, click save. Or we can change, let's create new menu item, for instance, choose file, I don't know, this one, set name, set weight and price, and click save. Or we can click cancel and go back without changes and so on. The next opportunity that we're going to add is the ability to place an order. The basic idea is that the user can add menu items to the shopping cart and then click place order to create a new order. For placing an order, we will execute a Cube application service method. So we need to create a service in Cube application. So let's go to the studio, open the middleware section, click new service, set name order service, and click OK. Then select order service bin and click ID. Let's switch to the order service interface and add 2 methods. And then go back to the order service bin and implement these methods like this. Place order method accepts order items, create a new order for them, raise it with current user, obtained from user session source, set status cooking, and then commit our order and returns it. Cancel order, try to load existing order from the database by its ID, and if there is order in the database with given ID, then we set a status canceled and commit this order. Otherwise, we throw new exception that there is no order with given ID. Now let's make our business methods accessible for external clients through the REST API. Let's go to the studio, open Service Editor and switch to REST Methods tab. And select REST invocation allowed for both methods, place order, cancel order, and click OK. Studio will create the REST services XML file and write the methods description into it. After restarting the application server, we will be able to invoke your business methods using HTTP requests. So let's restart our application. While the Cube application is restarting, let's proceed with the Angular application. First of all, we need to add model classes for order item and order. So let's go to the ID. Within model directory, let's create a new class with name order item. Okay, so our order item has ID, reference to the menu item, and its quantity. And we need to create one more class, order. Order class has reference to the user, a collection of order items, status represented by type order status with cooking, delivering, finished, and canceled values, and create TS field for creation date. Now, when the new model classes were created, let's create a new service for working with orders. So within the services directory, let's create a new service with name order. Let's open it and replace its content. So we inject alert service, Kube integration service, obtaining Kube app instance. To place orders, we use invoke service method from the Kube app, and passing service name is the same as in our Kube application. Method name, place order, and input parameters. For place order, we need to pass a collection of order items. To cancel order, we also call for invoke service method. We call for cancel order method and pass order ID as input parameter. Okay, now let's update the menu items browser so that it can place the order. Let's open menu items browse HTML. Let me close others and replace its content with the following. Open menu items browse component TS and replace its content with the following. I've added several methods such as add to cart. This method accepts menu item, and if there is order item which refers to the same menu item, then we just increase value of quantity field of order item class. Or if there is no order items with given menu item, then we create new order item, set quantity to 1 and add it to order items collection. We can remove order item from cart, and to place order, we call place order method from order service and then we set order items to empty collection. Also, we have method which calculates total amount for all added order items, and we want to store this user card in the storage, and we need to implement this method. So open storage service and add the following methods. And one constant. Okay, so this method's the same as for current user, but we generate cards item key using card items key prefix and the user info identificator. So each user will have its own card. Also, we need to add the order service to the providers so that it becomes injectable. So let's open app module TS and add order service to it. Okay, and let's restart our application. Okay, let's open our application. Click login. So now we see a card. We can add menu items to it, and then click place order. And again, we can add menu items. We can see total, place order. The last thing that we need to add is an ability to overview the user's orders. For that purpose, we are going to create a REST query which filter orders by user login. So let's go to the studio, open data model section, select order entity, click new REST query, set name user orders query, select view order view, set jQuery query. We want to load orders where user login equal to the parameter user login. And let's add this parameter. So user login with type string. Yes. And click OK. And we need to restart Cube application. Okay, now go to the Angular application and open orders service. Okay, and let's replace its content with the following. So I've added injection for user service and get orders method. So get orders method invokes query method from Cubo app, passing order entity name and query name with value for the parameter user login. So this user login has the same name as in our user orders query parameter. Now let's create a new component to display orders. Set name orders. Let's replace its HTML template with the following. So just simple table. Add styles. And replace content of the component with the following. Okay, so we have load orders method, which invokes get orders method from order service, and we have the cancel method, which invokes cancel order method, and we have method to calculate order total price. Now let's add the routing rule so that we will be able to navigate to our orders components. So let's open up routing module. For orders path, we'll open orders component. And let's restart the page. Okay, let's log in. and we can navigate to orders and see two created orders, and we can cancel one of them, both of them. So the main goal of our webinar is reached. We have taken a look at the REST API methods and how we can execute them within Angular application using the KubeRest JS library to facilitate REST API usage.
Thanks for watching.